And to understand some of these odor approaches that we'll talk about, we'll first just talk a little bit about what is odor. And it's kind of interesting because there is a scientific aspect to understanding it, but it's also something that's very hard to quantify and not that useful to quantify. So we use a mix of quantitative and qualitative methods to understand odor. So I'll show you those, but to understand what's happening with odor at all, and you may have seen the Magic School Bus that explains this very well. Odor is actually detecting physical particles. So those are those odor compounds that enter your nose and are detected by your olfactory bulb. So the picture on the screen here shows all these receptors in the olfactory bulb, and they're like, thousands and millions of types of molecules possible on Earth. And these receptors are each suited to a small group of them. So based on the shape and the size, they'll be able to say, oh, hey, there's one of these there, there's one of these there. So your odor compounds are going to come floating into your nose. If they fit into one of these receptors, then the receptor will say, hey, there's a little bit of this, maybe there's a little bit of that. And then based on how many receptors get triggered, that will give you a sense of how strong is that odor. So you're actually getting these particles into your system. And a way to demonstrate this is if you have a candy or a cup of tea or anything like that, you can try and take a sip of it just normally. Let the whole experience come to you. Notice what you taste, notice what you smell, and then try it again with your nose plugged and see how it's different. And that's because a lot of our sense of taste actually comes from the odor compounds that come into our olfactory bulb through our nose and our mouth while we're eating. So we have some senses on our tongue, salty, sour, those really basic ones, but some of the more nuanced ones come through our nose. So you might notice when you're, tasting something with your nose open versus with your nose closed, it'll taste completely different because you're missing those odor compounds that are stimulating your olfactory bulb in different ways. So when we're talking about odor control, we're really talking about these odor compounds and either destroying them or capturing or them just preventing these little pieces of waste degradation products basically from getting into our bodies in different ways. Now, I said there's a mixture of qualification and quantification when it comes to odor because it's kind of a tricky thing to talk about. And one of the concepts we use to talk about odor is a hedonic tone. So hedonism is like pleasure seeking. So hedonic tone is the pleasantness of an odor, and -10 is really bad, and then +10 is really good. An odor wheel is a hedonic tone is just like a line, right? An odor wheel is a two-dimensional kind of representation of different types of odors. So just like we have flavors with salty, sweet, bitter, an odor wheel kind of maps out some more complex kind of ways we experience odor. And something that's really funny about odor that makes it really appropriate to use a more qualitative technique is that odor is perceived differently at different concentrations and in different mixtures. So there's some odors that are at a really low concentration we could find pleasant, but at a really high concentration we would find unpleasant, or in combination with different odor compounds we might like, but by themselves or in combination with others we might not like. So that's why it's not so useful to measure different odor compounds specifically and really take it as a group with all the odor compounds that are present and all their concentrations and examine that holistically using something like a hedonic tone to describe the good or badness, or an odor wheel to describe the general sensation that you're receiving. So here's an example of the odor wheel. So it's got a few more sectors than like the taste one with salty, sweet, and bitter and things like that. So there's all these different spheres of kind of similar smells, and you can have mixes of these smells. Like any odor would be built of different amounts of these different pieces and different flavors of each of these different pieces. So if you start at the outside, these are the actual odor compounds that are going into your nose and sitting on your olfactory bulb. And then as you move in, it will become more and more and more general. So a way that you can use this is by going from the inside out and finding the most general term and then getting more and more detailed and then picking out the odor compounds that might create some of those things. And going back to the idea of the receptors, the shape of a receptor might be triggered by similar odor compounds. So for example, in this green sector in the top right corner, we have some examples of these pine, lemon, grassy smells are eucalyptol and limonene. And if you look at the structures on the side here, they both have similar structures. They're different, but they're generally, these are a lot more similar than some of the other ones I've shown here. And these both are detected by the nose in similar ways. And ones that are way different shapes or have different functional groups, like sulfurs and amines, will be detected in different ways. So that's kind of how some of these get grouped together by some of their functional groups and shapes.